versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie.
Welcome back to Movie versus Movie. And yes, this is us restarting this podcast for like the fourth time. But I promise it's going to stick this time. Because guess what? We have an amazing co-host now. Why don't you just give a little bit of your dulcet tones over there?
Hello, hello.
Who are you?
This is Patrick.
Patrick has agreed to come on as a co-host and is going to be doing this series with me. I'm so excited, but we also have a little bit of a guest on today. Who is that over there?
This is Alice.
Oh, Alice, why are you on today?
Because we are doing two movies about women. And
We
I
are.
thought maybe don't do the podcast without a woman on it.
Yeah, it's pretty fair.
Seems important.
Yeah, so
Shit.
yeah, our first one back, we want to come out strong.
Swinging.
Swinging. So we decided to do two crazy good, popular in the zeitgeist movies. One from early 2000 and one from like
2009.
2009? Okay.
2009.
I would argue it's kind of back in the zeitgeist, though. I feel like it's,
Yeah. I
it's
agree.
going through a reclamation.
Yeah, it's definitely cult status, and now it's starting to come up. We're talking, of course, about Jennifer's Body, and we, of course, paired that with the new hit classic,
Barbie.
Barbie, by Greta Gerwig. And so we put these two together because, honestly, we saw Jennifer's Body, and we were like, this is all about the kind of objectifying of women, the patriarchy. This is about women commodification, women-centered friendships, and how those can be a little dangerous, I guess.
Yeah.
And also sort of has like a queer undertone a little bit.
Definitely.
Whereas Barbie kind of has all the same things, though I would say that
Less violent.
it's less violent. Though there was that Ken fight on the beach that we'll talk about.
Yes, and there's also when Alan fights the construction workers.
Pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. So what we usually do now is that we'll go through the plot line and kind of talk about one at a time, and then at the end we'll kind of talk about which one has sort of the best encapsulates the theme, which is what we talked about earlier, like women, patriarchy, and being a woman in the world these days. And we'll see which one we say comes out of the cage as winner of this month's theme. So why don't we jump into it? What do you guys want to start with? We want to do Jennifer's Body? We want to do Barbie? What are we feeling?
Yeah, this is Jennifer's Body.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Jennifer's Body. This one came out of nowhere for me because I totally missed this when I was in high school.
Which makes
Was it?
sense.
Yeah, I was just like, not something that I was interested in. I was a sophomore in high school. I remember it being everywhere, and we can get into this a little later too, but like the marketing was very much for like frat boys and was not really marketed to me at all. But what do you guys remember about when this came out like all that time ago?
Yeah, I think I did not see it. Yeah, I would have been 14, 15. But for me, it was probably because it was a horror movie, and I was
me too.
terrified of anything
Same.
remotely horror.
But I will say that this one is not too bad when it comes to a horror movie.
No.
Like I was very entertained more than I was scared.
I will say,
I would say, Nick, you were the most scared out
you
of
were
all.
pretty scared.
You jumped and screamed once.
I'm a weenie, okay? Of course I was. But
I was just surprised you were more scared than me.
This is the first movie we watched together that could be classified as horror, and I know that you've watched far scarier movies
Yes.
that I would maybe not want to watch, and I was
Sure.
like, can you handle those movies?
Listen, the thing is, and Alice, thank you for holding my hand. Patrick, you didn't hold my hand. That's okay. But I view horror movies very much as like as bonding moments where you do something traumatic together and then you're bonded more. In high school, that was my sort of thing. So I've seen lots of scary movies, but I hate them. I think that they're so scary and I don't like being scared. And I also have a very vivid imagination. So later that night, I'll be like, oh my God, all these horrible things are about to happen to me.
Can't stop thinking about Scooby-Doo too.
I know.
Monsters Unleashed.
Yeah, the monsters are unleashed.
But I do feel like it was, I guess, like it was marketed as like sexy Megan Fox.
Yes.
They make out. it was marketed to men.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I really remember this coming out, but I'm sure I didn't think it was a movie for me.
Yeah.
Which I was probably I was 18 when this came out, so I was probably exactly the market demographic for what Diablo Cody and the director actually wanted was for teenage girls to be seeing this movie.
Yeah.
And I, of course, was like, oh, this is just sexy Megan Fox. Like
Totally mismarketed. But
this
I
is
will
not a movie for women.
I'll also say, like, Megan Fox is good in this movie.
She's very good.
Yeah,
she's great.
And
This is her best performance, I think.
I would say. And I also think that it was like, what a shame that they sort of simplified it down to that. And it's sort of like, again, it kind of proves the movie's point in some ways that, like, Megan Fox, there's like all these horrible stories around like how when she was auditioning for the Transformers movie that
She had to clean Michael Bay's car.
Yeah, and he basically just filmed her in a bikini cleaning
Disgusting.
his car and stuff like that. Like, she is good at what she does. And in this movie, I think she plays the part, which is what she keeps getting pigeonholed in that way, perfectly, and kind of shows like the brutality underneath that assumption and what that can do to people.
Yeah.
Like, wow, what great casting, first of all. I thought it was
perfect.
Yeah, so good. What do you think, Patrick? Like, did you think that this, like, casting as a whole, like, it was weird that young Neil was in there. I found that a little distracting. But I also feel like he's kind of perfect as, like, the boyfriend to the main character as well.
Yeah, no, that was his. I mean, he peaked in that era.
I haven't seen him in anything
A sweet
since.
little boy.
Yeah, he was
I
just
don't
like
even know the actor's name.
snatching up all those roles and then
Disappeared.
But no, yeah, I feel like, I mean, that's the thing. It's like I feel like what this movie is trying to do, it mostly succeeds in doing, and like having, Megan Fox was like an incredible casting choice, and Amanda Seyfried's great in it too. I do think, it was just framed and marketed. It was probably like, ahead of its time a little bit, and just like the world wasn't ready for what Diablo Cody was putting out.
And I think Barbie is saying what it's saying very obviously
Yes.
and very heavy-handedly, which is what we need in terms of a feminist lesson. But Jennifer's Body is saying so many things so subtly.
And also more complexly.
Yes.
But I think that, to your point of like what people need or whatever, this movie,
People were not ready for it.
even like critics, when they if you like read the old critiques of this movie, it's like, it's like the scares are fun but not hot enough, and it's like, you missed the whole point of this movie. So why don't we start at the beginning and kind of talk about what it's about. So our main character is named Anita, but everyone calls her Needy and like right away, I love a character whose name basically
Is their thing.
and she has like
That's the most heavy-handed detail of the
actually,
movie.
I think that the most heavy-handed version of that is in Inception, where
Mal.
Mal or whatever, the wife of Leonardo DiCaprio, the bad lady in the movie, is literally named Bad in French. Anyway, but so Anita is living in Devil's Kettle, which is like a small town in
Great
Minnesota.
name for a town.
I know.
Yeah.
What a great day. It's very Buffy-esque kind of thing.
And just, I like the lore. I love that the town has lore.
Yeah.
And that it comes back a little bit. I kind of wanted more of the town lore, because you get like this whirlpool, the mysterious whirlpool that.
Yes.
Yeah, that like scientists have thrown stuff in, but nothing has ever come out, so they don't know how deep it goes. I've thought about this, but I'm interested to talk about it with you later. So let's put a pin in that and like remind me of that, because the ending has something about that. But the first thing we see of Anita is she's in a mental facility, and she's violent. She like kicks a nurse in the teeth.
Start at the end.
Yeah, and she is like kind of doing some self-harm stuff. It's like very traumatized, and she's like, I wasn't always this way. And then we go back to the beginning, which is her with glasses on, but so obviously she's ugly now. And she's sort
Which
of...
it's like, come on.
Yeah.
It's Amanda Seyfried.
Honestly, like that trope early in like both the 90s and 2000s, where they would take one of the most beautiful actresses and just throw glasses and be like, look how frumpy she is. She just needs to be transformed. Wild.
Which they also do in Barbie.
They do.
Ooh. Connection.
All right, we'll come back to that as well. But so she is best friend since childhood with kind of the hottest, most popular girl in school, Jennifer Check. And so they have very little in common except for this kind of history. And Needy kind of does whatever Jennifer wants. And Jennifer basically comes up very early in the movie and says, I want to go see this band and you need to come with me. And we see her kind of saying like, no, my boyfriend and I were going to like have the night together. And she was like, come on. And then she just goes with her anyway. And this is kind of the start of like the undertones of some like romantic feelings between the two, I would say.
I think that it's saying a lot about what it's like to have a best friend, especially in high school, and the power dynamics and how you can be really obsessed with each other in a way that can sometimes feel romantic, but sometimes not. It's a very intense time.
Yeah, well, this is interesting because like the big kiss of the movie is between them later on in the movie. And it does feel in a way kind of confusing because they both are not queer, like outwardly queer in the movie. And they both have like kind of sexual relationships with men in the movie, like actually stated to have happened within the movie. And then you have this kiss between them that feels very like emotional and sort of has sexual undercurrents. Do you think that though that is more of them being like, we're like best friends and just wanting to be physically close to each other? Or do you think that Diablo Cody was going for more of like, this is how it feels to be coming of age as like a bi person or a queer person within high school, you know what I mean?
I don't know why that kiss is in there. It definitely doesn't feel like any sort of like gratuitous, like, ooh, we're gonna put something in there for the boys to have these two hot girls make out. It's definitely not that. I don't know if either of the characters are queer. I think Diablo Cody is just kind of commenting on like when you're growing up as a girl and you have these really close women friends or other girl friendships that like it does cross the line into sexual sometimes, and it doesn't necessarily mean, well, for a lot of girls it does mean that they are queer. A lot of my friends have had that experience of kissing their friends when they were young, and then being queer. But it also kind of doesn't necessarily mean that you are, but it's just something that happens. I think it's just, when you're a girl, kind of the lines are a bit more blurred.
Well, it's just really interesting because that scene is bookended by two scenes of pretty gratuitous, bloody violence, like scary violence. Like, I think right before this is when she like rips apart the like emo kid, Jennifer does, to like refuel or whatever. And then right after it is her going after Needy's boyfriend to kill him in the prom.
Oh.
Those are like the things right next to each other.
Right. And right before the emo murders intercut with Needy and her boyfriend having sex for the first time.
Yeah.
While Needy's like having visions of Jennifer committing violence, and there's blood coming through this on the ceiling in a vertical seam.
And we can also talk about like the blood of it all, of like the blood of, maybe losing your virginity, the blood of like, your menstrual cycle. Like there's a lot of blood, girl.
Right. And an interesting comparison to Barbie, which is a very bloodless movie. Which I saw some like critiques from a feminist lens of it being so bloodless in terms of.
It's also interesting because like Barbie has that whole thing with the construction workers where she's like, I don't even have genitals. And it is sort of like a bioessentialism, but also like we're not even going there. Like, this is not part of me. When Jennifer's body is very much like, oh yeah, like this is all kind of a part of everything. I don't know. I feel like by putting those really like physical violent scenes that kind of are like, because in horror tropes, the slasher is very much like, the knife is piercing like a woman. It's very kind of like a pseudo-sexual. And so having like kind of the reverse happen to these men right bookended between this like kind of tender moment of kissing between them that doesn't end in sort of like bloody violence. Because in the end, she just kind of leaves, even though Needy is sort of like, I don't think I'm interested in what is happening right now.
Right. And she's also like, wait, no, like I'm mad at you.
Yeah.
Like there's something else going on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that scene is very much the director saying something very specific, but I think that it is so clogged up in the sort of marketing of it all, of like, this was them kissing because they're hot and they're women, that it was sort of missed. But I also like, I didn't clock the kind of like vertical seam and everything. Like, yes, that makes a whole lot of sense. But I am also like, as somebody who is queer and is bi, so has had this sort of like experience growing up in high school, it felt very like pointed to continually show Needy thinking of Jennifer in pseudosexual situations as well, and then not have it be a queer thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot there.
Yeah, but
it's just so funny that this movie, like, I feel like there's the side of it is like, this is like this queer movie because there's like so much depth to it and so much you can talk about it, but then it's also just like camp in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And there's just the stuff of like, ow, my tit, like she gets stabbed at the end. And like reading like letterbox reviews, like people are just like quoting all the lines that they love. So I feel like it has that too. But you're like, Diablo Cody, like where, I mean, it's always, you like thinking about just like intent of like the people that are making this. You're like, how much did they think about this, or were they just making something that they wanted to make? And like,
which I feel like there are some movies where it is being made and I'm watching and I just feel like, okay, this was just done. Like Marvel movies do this a lot, where it's just kind of like a moving camera that is kind of circling action and people are like kind of sitting and talking to each other, and I'm like, not a whole lot of thought went into the actual like showing of the scene. But then in a lot of this movie, like the dialogue is not just normal dialogue, it is like Diablo Cody dialogue. And so it's very, it just immediately is like, okay, everything here is like pretty specific. Like Low Shoulder, the band's like a lot of the stuff with them feels very specific, like the way. So I mean, we're there anyway. They go to this dive bar to see Low Shoulder, which is a new indie band that is coming from the big city,
Fronted by Adam Brody.
Yes. And it is very clear early on that they're kind of looking for a virgin.
Yes. And I think the movie wants you to think that they're looking for a virgin because they want to sleep with a virgin.
Yes.
But it's definitely much more sinister than that.
Yeah.
And when they sort of prey on Jennifer, I actually found it to be super relatable, the part where they're taking Jennifer in their van and she wants to go, and Needy is kind of like, no, like I know something really bad is going to happen.
Yeah.
Like I have been that friend with a girlfriend out, and she like wants to leave with somebody, and I'm you're kind of powerless to stop them, but like so many bad things could happen.
In the way that part is played, like that's right after the fire has happened,
we have to talk
and so
about
there's
that.
this like combination of like Jennifer's like not saying anything. She's kind of got like a 1,000-yard stare. It's like this thing of like she's in shock, but also like I feel like it's you're like she's also like maybe under this like kind of spell. It seems like
like so. What happens is that it is shown Jennifer comes into this bar. She knows a lot of the men in there. It is also kind of shown that she has had sex with a couple of them. One random guy who never comes back is Chris Pratt.
Which we were all happy for.
Yeah, but in one of his early roles where he like wants to become a cop or whatever, and we're like, why is this guy in here? And I was like, of course he's coming back, but never shows up again. It's so weird. But the dialogue between them is like, oh, they've had sex, and also they like Jennifer's like super into this band, and when they're like, oh, is your friend like probably isn't a virgin though, and she's like, no, she is, kind of defending Jennifer's honor, even though that might backfire in a way. There's also this thing that we kind of read up on afterwards, Alice, about sort of the marketing of tragedy is kind of a theme throughout this whole movie, but this is the first time.
Commodification of tragedy.
Yeah, the first time we see it though is when Jennifer comes back with the shots, and they're twin tower shots.
They're 9/11 shooters. And they're red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
Which completely ties into what happens later with Low Shoulder.
Yeah.
making money off of this tragedy.
Yeah.
Which is kind of incredible, even for a movie coming out in, 2009?
2009,
Yeah.
to be commenting on the commodification of 9/11 is bold.
Yes.
I'm into it.
Yeah, and so they're watching the show. The whole bar catches on fire during this performance. It kind of feels like you said, Patrick, like a little bit of a spell. Like Jennifer's kind of like goo goo gaga eyes for the band. Is not even really aware that a fire has been set around her. And then Needy kind of jumps into action and saves Jennifer by kind of throwing her through a window kind of thing. And they are able to escape. But then comes the thing you were talking about where they're sitting there and they're just kind of collecting themselves, and you can hear people screaming behind them. And the band comes up and he has whiskey and he's giving her
He's
whiskey
force
to
feeding
drink.
her.
Yeah, it's very kind of rape culture-y of oh, just keep drinking and come with me and my friends.
Yeah.
It's even a white unmarked van. It's pretty blatant, I would say. But she goes with them, and then kind of that ends, and Needy goes home, and in the middle of the night sees Jennifer, who's vomiting up black blood and is going through and eating chicken in her fridge and
Acting very strange.
very strange. But it is also very clear that Jennifer has been through something. Her clothes are ripped. She's kind of
She's bloody.
Yeah.
She looks like she's been mauled.
Yes. And then she kind of just leaves. And then the next day, totally fine at school.
And pretending like nothing happened.
Yeah. Which I think this is really interesting because it also, this movie has a really interesting and I think complex, it's one of the better ways I've seen trauma shown, on both sides. Because
And kind of rape culture sort of allegory a little bit.
Yeah.
Jennifer shows up and we find out later what has happened to her. But when she does show up at the beginning, you kind of get the sense that that's what has happened.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, her kind of pretending like nothing has happened. I think that would be very relatable to somebody who's been through that.
But and she's also lashing out in class and stuff.
That's the thing, yeah,
Yes.
even I feel like before,
Overcorrecting.
her character is kind of sarcastic and a little rude, but it's dialed up a notch after that. And very much nothing happened. I do think too, it being a movie that is, very, metaphorically about rape and rape culture, I feel like it does pretty well in a way of I would say the part where goes finally at the end goes back and recaps what happened that night. That part's pretty intense and hard to watch.
Yeah.
But without steering into there's other movies where it's just extremely excessive. I guess to be able to depict that and say something about it while having it be horrific, but without it being
Sexual.
too over the top.
Yeah. So the next morning at school, like we said, Jennifer's there. Needy is obviously concerned. And everyone is sort of talking about this fire who has killed students at
Many
the school.
people have died.
It's the big tragedy of the town, which is kind of this sleepy Midwestern town. And then it kind of has this weird thing where Jennifer seduces the football captain or whatever, who is
right.
really sad about his friend who has just died in this fire. And she kind of uses that they were both at the fire, the friend who died and her, to kind of pull the captain away and start seducing him. I felt like this one specifically felt very weird in the movie because it's not well, actually, this is a great thing to talk about. All of the men that she preys upon in the movie after the low shoulder incident are people who seem just kind of fine dudes. They aren't portrayed as
remember the foreign exchange student?
That was sad, yeah.
That one is really hard.
Yeah. She is legitimately bad. It's not she just goes around Dexter style killing other rapists or whatever. It's not simple like that. She is the foreign exchange student that is later revealed on her way from Needy's house that first night, comes across and she's like, does anyone know where you are? And he's like, no, and everyone probably thinks I'm dead. And then she takes him into the forest and kills him.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily, because we've introduced before that there are men at the school and in the town that she's had sex with or had relationships with. And it's not necessarily those people. Like
Yeah.
it's not necessarily people that she seems to like have history with.
Yeah.
But it's kind of
Kind
like
of random.
yeah, but it is kind of because it's just like she needs to feed on men to
Yeah.
keep herself alive.
But it's also interesting because like they all seem to have like to want an emotional connection, and then she ends up like kind of using that as a way to get them and physically kill them. Like the sports jock like wants to talk about his friend and wants to like be with someone who understands like through that, and then they go into the woods and they like start kissing, and he's like obviously pretty confused in that moment, and then she's kind of like shut up and like have sex with me, which leads to this death. But then the other kid, the emo kid later on that's like interested in Jennifer to date, is sort of looking for like an emotional connection with her, but then she's just sort of like, you just want me physically, right? And then like kills him as well.
And I think the movie's also commenting on boys and how they, they are not afraid to put themselves at risk, and they don't have to have the same kind of stress at all times that women and non-binary people have to feel. We have to keep ourselves protected at all times. We have to be on guard pretty much no matter where we are, if we're not in our own homes, and often sometimes in our own homes, to make sure that nothing bad happens to us. And the fact that, is his name Colin, the emo boy?
Kid.
Yeah.
He very... she tells him to meet her at what he thinks is her house. He goes to a house. It's clearly a house under construction. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
He should not go
They're
in
like
there.
rats running around.
There's
He's just like, huh?
and he's like, oh, I guess this is kind of
this out.
romantic.
Yeah.
Wow, she set up candles for us. And he just goes, and he's not scared at all because she's a hot girl.
Yeah, and I think like I don't know how much this is like she's the hottest and most popular girl in school. And like, in maybe some degree, like these are guys that would be like out of her league normally. So they're like, oh, Jennifer's interested in me. I will just like I'll do anything.
And she doesn't have to do much.
Yeah.
She barely has to do anything to seduce them.
I mean, she kind of says that to Needy like earlier when she was like, just like show your like two like best weapons or whatever, and like is like talking about her tits or whatever. But there is like a really interesting thing that they do cinematography wise when after she kills somebody, she like is rejuvenated, which is sort of like the demon or whatever. But there's always like a shot of her in a very objectified way directly after. Like after she kills the football guy, it's her swimming naked through the lake and then coming out of the lake. And it's like very much like, oh, this is, like supermodel, like flipping of the hair kind of thing. Like the shot is meant to kind of evoke that. And it is right after this sort of butchery that happens. So it is sort of like in a weird way showing like how men, like as your body count rises, you become more like sexually appealing to people. You know what I mean?
And when they were filming that, there were photographers in the woods taking pictures of almost naked Megan Fox.
Really? Wow. Fucking.
So
Yeah.
she could not
Jesus
catch
Christ.
a break.
Poor Megan Fox
Like,
is
how much
really
she
how I
had to-
feel after watching this movie.
She had to go through so much. And she hasn't had a vehicle written for her this good since this movie.
Yeah.
No.
Like, what has she been in?
I had pulled up her
New
IMDb
Girl?
earlier.
And she's still, even now, like I feel like she is only in the news when something sexualized comes out. Like there was that like picture that was leaked of her like giving her boyfriend at the time like a blowjob or something, and then it got spread around the internet, and it was like, man, this woman cannot catch a break. And now she's dating Machine Gun Kelly, which I think is just a bad decision generally.
She cannot catch a break.
But yeah, like
She's been
fucking
through a
weird.
lot.
Yeah.
Should we talk about sort of the reveal of like what has happened to Megan? And
Yeah, so let's talk about it. So, because like this is also when Low Shoulder starts becoming super famous, which is the indie band that was at the thing, and it is sort of revealed that Low Shoulder has done something.
Yes. So they were trying to sacrifice a virgin to do a spell that would make them super famous. But because Megan Fox is not, or Jennifer is not a virgin, it goes wrong. And so they try to kill her, but instead they turn her into a succubus. But they still do get famous, which is interesting because it's like, is their fame because of the fire, or is their fame because of what they did to Jennifer, or is it a combination of the two?
Yeah. And this is like an interesting place where this is kind of revealed, because after the emo kid gets killed, she, like, Needy is going home and runs into Jennifer that's like covered in blood walking around and like flees. And then when she gets home, Jennifer is in her bed. And I think maybe this is also kind of who then like reveals what happened to her that night. And there is like kind of a thing that happens where there's like the kiss and all that kind of stuff. And maybe it's like just Jennifer trying to relate to people the way that she's now accustomed to, which is that people want her for her body. And so she's trying to do that so that Needy will be with her. And then she is not reciprocated when Needy sort of pushes her away. And then she is instead reveals what actually happened to her, which is a little deeper, I should say. Because then she talks about like Low Shoulder essentially took her in a van and she was kind of like, what's going on? And then they drag her into the woods and like sacrifice her to the devil and throw her down that pit, which was talked about earlier, like the whirlpool, which is the part that Patrick, you were saying was kind of hard to watch.
Yeah, that seems pretty intense.
Yeah, it's rough.
It reminded me of Promising Young Woman in a lot of ways, of like the worst thing possible is happening to you as a woman, and these men are just laughing and they're singing 8675309.
That's right.
Like it's so
Scary,
dark and scary and visceral that they are so lighthearted and they are murdering her.
Yeah, because they don't care about her at all.
It also felt sort of like Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Like just like so disgusting. But I feel like Diablo Cody like really hits the nail on the head with that scene.
Right, because the two, I think, like Adam Brody is the leader of the band. He's the one. This is his idea, and I almost feel like the other band members are kind of portrayed as like a little like hesitant. Yeah, and they're like, I don't know about this, but like obviously they do nothing to stop it and actively participate in it. And I feel like there's similar stuff there that
Completely.
Yeah, but it's also like there's the one person's like, I don't know if I want to do it. And he's like, do you want to be like playing in bars forever or whatever in like shithole areas? Like I want to be huge or whatever. And it is sort of like that this person is so inconsequential to them that they can just use and throw her away.
And it's interesting sort of like playing on the like virgin versus slut horror movie thing.
In a way, and this is interesting too, and I want to talk about it as we get to the end, but it sets it up like it has to be a virgin, like it has to, but it wasn't. And it still kind of worked in a way that like...
but we don't know why. We don't know why they become famous, because it could be because of the fire.
Yeah, because they start getting like, because they like were heroic at the bar and tried to save people and blah blah blah. But also, it's like kind of revealed through like Needy doing research in the occult section at her high school library.
Incredible scene
where she finds like all the demon books, and it's like, oh, when this happened, since Jennifer wasn't a virgin, like a demonic thing was like back in her body, which is why she survived, and also why she
needs to feed.
Yes, which I think is interesting too, because it's like I'm interested in what that says, like in the metaphor, because it's like this person who is already kind of like aware of her sexual like power has this happen to her, which is obviously like a rape metaphor, and then is able to sort of like turn that around to like, and she's kind of using it to prey on someone or people to retain her beauty. It's interesting. There's definitely something there. I'm not sure I'm smart enough to quite pair.
There's a lot in here.
Yeah, this is a movie you could watch like several times, I think, and like keep getting more and more out.
Yeah.
But then it is like kind of continues on. Needy begs her boyfriend to like not be alone and be around Jennifer and don't go to the prom.
Right. She basically breaks up with, or doesn't want to go to, says she won't go to prom with him because she knows that Jennifer's going to feed.
Yeah. And she basically Needy's boyfriend is an idiot and is like, I'm just going to go anyway. And Jennifer starts kind of like seducing him and being like, oh, you look so handsome, all that. Like, can you come with me to this other place? And Needy is at the prom where Low Shoulder has come to play. And they kind of end up in this like old swimming pool building fighting because Jennifer kills her boyfriend or is like mortally wounded him. And then it is them kind of fighting, and in the end she is able to kill Jennifer. Does anyone remember like quite how that happened?
Well, she doesn't kill her. What happens from there? Because she doesn't kill her.
She doesn't kill her at the pool.
In her bed.
Yeah, she kills her in her bedroom.
So it was because Needy like comes and her boyfriend Chip impales Jennifer through the stomach with a pool skimmer. That was like a pretty brutal, also very like penetrative kind of weird thing. But it doesn't kill her. She just kind of escapes.
Right, because then
Chip
she
dies.
runs over to Chip.
She also she has healing powers.
Yeah, because when she's fed, she can essentially live through anything.
Yeah.
She has to be stabbed through the
That's
heart.
right, because I forgot about the scene where she cuts her arm.
Yeah. Oh, that's awful. There's some self-mutilation in this movie. All right. So then Needy, like obviously angry that her boyfriend was just killed, goes to Jennifer's bedroom. They fight, and Jennifer like bites her and scratches her. But then Needy rips the best friend necklace that she has. Like they both have half of a best friend necklace. She rips it off of Jennifer's neck. And then Jennifer just kind of like stops. She's just like, oh, like this is what has happened. And then she is killed by Needy. And then Jennifer's mom comes in. She goes to the mental asylum for killing her friend.
But she retains some of the powers.
Yes,
Right,
the demon powers.
Because she got
Scratched?
Scratched
Maybe
or bit.
scratched. Maybe just scratched so she doesn't get like the full...
Which is how then they kind of show like her self-actualize and is able to, she's like able to escape prison because she has demonic strength and power.
Levitation.
But she has also kind of survived this trauma and then is able to escape and goes and finds Low Shoulder and kills them all.
Which-
Yes, I forgot, in the hotel.
Yeah,
Right.
which was very gratifying at the very end.
Yes.
And
Forgot about that.
she does it with the knife.
Yeah.
Because she picks the knife up out of the drain.
Yeah, and this is the thing I wanted to talk about is that at the beginning they were kind of like implying that this like is a portal somewhere that they don't know, but then it ends up that all of the stuff just comes out of the drain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which I was like, what? How did they not find it? It was just on the side of the road.
Yeah, like how did those
But I was
scientists
like,
not find that?
Is it a thing where it came to her when she needed it? The weapon revealed itself to her.
Yeah.
I think we should probably also talk just briefly about Needy's boyfriend.
Yes.
And
who is
What the movie is saying about quote unquote maybe nice guys, because he is very genuine and nice seeming throughout the whole movie.
But he wants a bone.
But he does want a bone, although I don't think he's putting undue pressure on.
I mean, there are a couple times, like at the first scene you see him, he's like taking his belt off and stuff, and then Jennifer comes over and she's like, oh, Jennifer's here, and then he's like, ugh, you know what I mean? So it is kind of like a weird thing.
And I think that's probably what the movie is saying, is that like, even though he seems nice, he's not actually that nice, and he's not actually that good of a guy, because the first instance that he has to cheat on Needy with Jennifer, he does.
Right.
There's no hesitation.
And he's just kind of like feckless and like doesn't really seem in touch at all with Needy and
what's
she's
happening
feeling,
around
even when
him,
she's
yeah.
explicitly telling him how she feels about things and what's going on. He's kind of gaslighting her, just like I don't know about that.
He doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't believe her when she's warning him.
But I do feel like it is a good representation of that like high school relationship where you're like, there's not really, is there really anything here?
Yeah.
Are we just two teenagers who like kind of want a bone and are just like, yeah, we'll be together in this like small town where there's no one else.
Yeah. And it is interesting too that when it's the first time that they have sex in the movie, but it doesn't feel like her first time.
I think it is though.
I think it is.
I think it is.
Interesting.
But she does not have a good time.
No.
It's definitely not a good experience.
And it also is interesting because like he seems to be, there's like a moment where it kind of seems like he is getting off a little bit on the noises that she's making, which are kind of pained and like.
And he is not keyed in at all to what is happening with her, and that's really gross.
Yeah. What a great movie, though. I think it's surprisingly funny, honestly. Like,
It is.
There
I
are a
mean-
lot of moments where I was like, "This is hilarious."
Yes.
Yeah, it's
She can write
it's-
dialogue.
Yeah, and it's Juno dialogue like written to an R rating too. Like
Yeah.
it's Juno, it's like slightly spicier Juno dialogue, which unfortunately includes multiple R slurs because
Yes.
that's what was
Yes.
spicy at the time.
It's
Yeah.
in a lot of movies.
I mean, it's
from
even in
that.
Scott Pilgrim.
It's in
Yeah.
Scott Pilgrim.
This does feel very much of a time too. Like it does feel like that, 2009 era of media. So if that's not your jam, you might not like it. I would also say like, man, there were some scares, but like I would say that this one was light on the horror. It was more of like, I would say it's more of like a thriller, maybe.
It's more gory
It is pretty gory.
than horror, I
Yeah.
would say. Than scary,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah, and yeah, like horror comedy. Also, though, criminally underutilized Amy Sedaris as Needy's mom.
Yes.
so good.
Why is she in 2 scenes?
I know, and there's like it feels like maybe there was more to that because there is something about her. It's like she's pretty absent.
There's a ton of characters like that.
Yeah,
like,
J.K. Simmons.
J.K. Simmons is in this movie.
Hair and a hook hand.
You
and
can't
get
just offer us
nothing.
Yeah, we can't. You can't offer us J.K. Simmons with a wig and a hook, and then just have him in 3 scenes, basically saying like, "This has just happened in the town."
Yeah,
like he doesn't
just
do anything
exposition.
else. But it is weird in that way, which I really appreciate. Like I like
I
a movie
love an
that's weird.
oddball movie where you're in a strange world, but they don't really, sort of like Bottoms, like things are just weird and you just accept it
Yeah.
because it's a movie. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah. I think too, I just thought about interesting too that there's not that much like familial relationship. Neither of the main characters seem to have siblings that we know of. Do they ever talk about any siblings?
No.
They're both loners, kind of.
Right.
We never
seem-
see Jennifer's parents until she's dead.
And we never see
Right.
Jennifer have any other friends either.
Yes, Needy and Jennifer. I feel like both of you said, Jennifer is the most popular girl in school. I don't think that that's true. She's definitely the hottest girl in school, but she's only friends with Needy. She doesn't seem to be sort of held up or adored by the kids in school.
It's true. Even
Yeah.
like the emo kids like are kind of introduced as a pack. Like
Yeah.
there's 5 of them, but otherwise there's just Needy and Jennifer.
They're their only friends.
And like the only time that you see people kind of interacting with Jennifer, it is through the lens of we have had sex once.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
yes.
It's true. That is true.
So that's an interesting idea. I didn't really catch that in it. I think that this movie is really great when it comes to kind of exploring these themes. I think that it says a lot about trauma too, and like how that can affect you and like
Or
change
how it can affect a town.
how it can affect a
Yeah.
town.
Yeah. Collective trauma and grief and how, the ways that like, they kind of deflect from it through this like, just kind of like consumption.
Yeah.
Because the town goes through all of these deaths, many of which we have no idea about anybody else who died in the fire, really. And then suddenly boys start being murdered.
Yeah. And there's also the thing where it's like there's that scene with the girl who's like super into Low Shoulder, and Needy is sort of like they're just making money off of the horrible things that happened here, and then she's like, no, they care about us or
Well,
whatever.
They were heroes in the fire, and
yeah.
Needy's like, no, I was there. They didn't do anything.
Yeah. And so it is sort of like a weird thing of like I don't know how like commercialism or capitalism like can seize upon tragedies as well.
And also like how we get inundated with tragedy all the time, and it starts to become like boring, and we stop caring after a while. Like after the 3rd boy is murdered, it's like not a big deal anymore.
Yeah. And it's also really, I think almost Barbie has like a very clear metaphor with the objectification of women as she is a doll. But I think that this movie actually does a better job at it, because you never see any of the adults ask Jennifer how she is or anything, or even Needy really. It's always through the lens of sort of like this is a person who is a sexual object, which I think is like really interesting, and I think does a little bit more towards like kind of fleshing out what the patriarchy actually is and does than Barbie does, but we'll talk about that in a second.
And also, it's a lot about patriarchy and capitalism, both.
Yeah.
Whereas Barbie is very much just about the patriarchy and not at all about white supremacy or capitalism, even though they all go hand in hand and they all support each other.
It does do a thing though, where like the foreign exchange student kid is like pretty much the only person of color in the movie, except for the woman who's like super into Low Shoulder, who's also a person of color, but like he's kind of the only one with like a lot of like a mentioned multiple times kind of thing, and he is just somebody who gets killed and is sort of kind of like the
it's like a little, I don't know, the way
that part is hard,
the way they introduce, because originally you just think he dies in the fire, so they introduce him, they're like, look, it's Ahmet, the foreign exchange student from India. He doesn't get any dialogue, and then he just dies in the fire. And it's almost played like a punchline a little bit. Like it felt weird.
Yeah.
And then like you do get him coming back later, but
but he comes back later and he does,
2009.
and he does.
That felt like 2090.
Yeah.
Like
that is, I think, this. I mean, maybe not the saddest part of the movie, but like. It's really hard when it's kind of like nobody knows where you are. Your family's not going to know what happened to you.
I guess that's maybe like the plot logic for why it's him, but it does just.
But
feel...
it could have been Chris Pratt. You know what I mean?
Right.
It could have been someone
it's true.
else.
Like no one. I don't know. It felt a little.
And it kind of feels like punching down a little bit in a weird way, even though it's not like she doesn't go over and like say a racial slur and kill him or something. It's not like anything so blatant. I guess it just feels weird that that happened to that character, right. I guess. So why don't we take a quick break, and then after this we'll talk about Barbie. Welcome to Tabletop. My name is Nick, and I think that fudging dice rolls is totally okay.
Hey, it's me, Franco, and rolling for initiative sucks.
I'm Daniel, and I think you should modify your first level characters as much as you want.
And I'm Shade, and if your TTRPG hasn't evolved into a LARP, you've done it wrong.
And we all host Tabletopped, a TTRPG podcast about all things games and storytelling.
And sometimes we have game designers, professional researchers, and even the occasional owlbear.
If this interests you, listen to Tabletop every Monday wherever you get your podcast. Welcome back, everyone. We are talking about Jennifer's Barbie versus Barbie. Oh, no. What did I do?
That's the name of the episode. That's the name of the episode.
Barbie.
Jennifer's Barbie.
What if she had a Barbie in the movie?
I mean, that would be perfect, right?
Yeah.
I wish she had.
For us, that would be like,
say.
whoa. It's like that thing with The Simpsons where it's like, The Simpsons predicted this. It's Jennifer's Barbie predicted Barbie.
Jennifer's Barbie predicted Barbie.
Did I do it again?
You did.
Jesus Christ. Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. We're talking about Jennifer's body, and we're now talking about Barbie on the theme of who did it better, talking about patriarchy, feminism, and womanhood. And we're going to go into kind of like the hit of the year, Barbie.
Or last year,
because it came out last year. Yeah. But let's talk about it. Barbie, directed, was it written also by Greta
I believe
Gerwig?
it was written by her and Noah Baumbach.
Oh.
Yes.
Her husband.
Noah Baumbach gets
or
credit.
partner. I don't
Partner.
know. I think they're married, actually.
Are they married now?
Who? Another famous director.
It's such a weird, like, I wonder where this came from, of her sort of like trying to get the Barbie brand to do this with. Like, it feels like so strange, but it works perfectly. Like, the movie does not function as sort of like a Space Jam-esque like
It's
advertisement.
not a commercial.
Yeah.
Right. But it is. I mean,
It is and it isn't.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And like definitely Mattel was like,
you're not that consciously aware of it during the movie, except for one scene, which we can talk about later.
okay, I can't wait. Because like the Mattel stuff, like part of the movie takes place in Mattel offices and kind of sets them up to be sort of this evil corporation, but it still sets up as though like at the end, like Barbies are important and everyone should have a Barbie.
Right.
Buy the Barbie.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
No, I think it just begs the larger question of like, yeah, can these massive corporations make make media that is like subversive in any way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to go immediately on a tangent, but I think of like the TV show Andor.
Yeah.
Have either of you watched Andor, the
No.
Star Wars TV show?
I've heard about it though. I've heard
It's-
it is the best Star Wars media that has come out in a while.
It's very good. It's all about like how a revolution actually starts. And I've listened to an interview with the director, and he's like, "This is like the most important thing I've made, where I can actually like communicate all these ideas, and it's all being filtered through the Disney Corporation."
Yeah.
But you watch it, and it's like politically very subversive, and it's
Yeah.
based on a lot of like real revolutions and
Yeah, and it's also
anyway,
sort of
yeah.
like shows the like bureaucracy of evil, of like
Yeah.
how just blindly following like a message that is given to you culturally can lead to sort of like innumerable bads.
Right. So I just think of it like Barbie though, when they're like, "Oh, look at like the Mattel executives," but I'm like, what does their executive board actually look like?
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder if it's like
Probably not a woman CEO, or they would or that would be in the movie.
yeah, and it's like also kind of weird. Like there's some stuff in there where the kid, the teenager in this movie, Sasha, who has this whole thing where she's like, Barbie has done bad things in the world and kind of lists them out, and Barbie's like, oh my god. But then at the end, she's also sort of pro Barbie, which kind of feels like we gotta like she's gonna be buying Barbies kind of thing. We'll get there. Let's start going through the plot. So we start in Barbie Land, Barbie World.
That's not the very beginning.
Starts with the
very
2001
beginning is-
opening, right?
Yeah, the 2001
Oh, yeah.
Space Odyssey opening.
With all of them playing.
With the little girls
yeah.
and the Helen Mirren intro. Of little girls only had baby dolls, so they could only pretend to be mothers until Barbie came along, and then they all smash like they're the apes.
Yeah.
They smash
and throw the Barbie up into the air.
Yep. And then a big Margot Robbie lands, and they're like, wow, I can be fashion now.
And Margot Robbie is playing stereotypical Barbie, which is like the first Barbie,
So
essentially.
white
White.
and blonde
Yeah.
and very stereotypically pretty.
Yep.
Which definitely this movie has some interesting things to say about beauty ideals.
Yeah, even it is. Can we go on a little bit of a tangent
Yeah.
with this?
Yeah.
Because there is a trans Barbie, but it is a very like passing trans Barbie. You know what I mean? Like it is somebody who, like,
Very femme.
yeah, just is very femme, and somebody who passes in a way that like. This is just something that I think about a lot, is that when you see representation of like trans folks or queer folks, it's usually people who like fit the general idea of what, you know, like a straight person would want a trans person to look like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of diversity in terms of the Barbies and the Kens that we see. We have a fat Barbie. We have Issa Rae.
We have a pregnant Barbie.
Is the president. She's black. I mean, we have Simu Liu, who's Asian. He's one of the Kens. So, you know, we do see a lot of the diversity, but like, are any of those important characters to the narrative in terms of Barbie Land? Not really. It's mostly about Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
So that's hard. But I do like that they made the effort somewhat to make it completely not homogenous.
Which is also interesting because the main humans that are playing with stereotypical Barbie are not white. And so it kind of is interesting that they chose to have a white Barbie be the one that this family is playing with as well. I know that it was probably a casting thing of like, we want Barbie's face, like we want stereotypical Barbie to be the Barbie that we follow rather than some other Barbie, but like it does feel a little bit weird from that perspective. Anyway, let's keep going. So they all reside in Barbie Land, which is sort of like this Barbie
Matriarchy.
run, yeah, where like you said, Issa Rae is like President Barbie, and all the Barbies that are, you know, have all of the professions that you can buy a Barbie and are all around
the
doing
Supreme
stuff.
Court is all Barbie.
Yeah, and they're
there's
making
Barbie scientists and doctors.
I also, to your point about like, can anything truly political be passed through a corporation? I thought it was really funny that they were talking about like repealing like money in politics or whatever, like the Hobby Lobby whatever decision that the courts made about corporations being treated as people. Like that is the case that they're arguing.
Yeah.
Which I was sort of like, this is a weird choice.
Yeah. I was funny little nod though.
Yeah, kind of strange that it's like in this in this movie about this corporation Mattel and this product line Barbie.
Yeah.
They are talking about not having corporate entities in politics. Very weird. Anyway, but they keep going on, and so all the Barbies have kind of these perfect days where they're going through and all doing their thing, and they have these great parties at night, and the Kens are sort of like
Accessories
that are trying to like get the attention of Barbie so that they will be chosen to like go with them, and are really, it's sort of the thing of like, I'm only alive when I'm with you kind of thing. And so Ken, the Ryan Gosling Ken, Beach Ken, is like really trying to be boyfriend girlfriend with stereotypical Barbie. And then we have this thing of like Barbie waking up the next day and being filled with sort of like ennui.
existential dread.
Yeah.
She's having thoughts of death.
Yeah, which sort of like kind of like flips all the other Barbies out. They're like, you have to go to Weird Barbie, which is the Barbie that, this is something that I thought was very funny, which is like the Barbie that the girl just played too hard with, and now is just kind of like a freak, which
We
is
all
great.
had them.
Right, incredibly relatable.
We all had them.
Yeah.
And also played incredibly by
Kate
Kate McKinnon.
Kate McKinnon, who did
Yeah.
just like an incredible job. When I saw her, I was like, of course, she's this like fucking weirdo.
It doesn't totally make sense that the movie is trying to get us to think that she's ugly.
Yeah. I don't know
Like
if
she kind of pops up and Margot Robbie's like, oh,
Right.
and it's kind of like,
You're like,
well, it's Kate McKinnon.
Yeah.
Not really.
it's Kate McKinnon, and she's sort of like weird, but is not sinister at all. She's just sort of like a fucking weirdo.
No.
Right.
She's just flexible.
She's just
Yeah.
flexible and has short hair. Really,
Yes.
Was the big thing, and like maybe some color in there. But she's basically like, hey, you whoever's playing with you on the outside is filling your head with all of this stuff, and if you want to become just a Barbie again, you have to go out there and fix it. And so she
Gives
decides,
her the choice between the high heel and the Birkenstock.
Yeah, and Barbie's like, the high heel, like which I find is interesting. Which she's like, I don't want to do any of that. I just want
It's
to
a
live
little
my
Matrix reference for
Yes.
sure. Blue
Well, it's
pill,
a,
red pill.
definitely a Matrix
Red
thing, but
pill.
it's also interesting around like if you think about the greater theme of sort of feminism and sort of like the people who of privilege within the system of of the patriarchy, the women who are elevated to such that they don't have to think about the troubles that the rest of the like womankind have to go through,
Which is
kind
why
of-
white feminism isn't feminism.
yeah, which is like kind of shown a little bit in that moment of like, of course I don't want to do it. It's played for laughs, but it is also kind of a thing of like, oh, that's, kind of shitty.
And
yeah.
one thing that I don't totally love is the cellulite
Yeah.
of it all, which is that we see Barbie's feet go from permanent high heels to flat,
Yeah.
Right.
which I think is perfect, very funny,
Yeah.
totally works in like something's going wrong here. Her feet are not permanent, high heels. But then she starts getting cellulite and is kind of like horrified by it.
Yeah.
Which I think a bit unfortunately. I think we get it, but it does feed into a little bit of the like the quote unquote ideal female body, woman body doesn't have cellulite,
Right. And
which is crazy.
I feel like the movie knows. There's the part where there's the Helen Mirren interlude where she's like, what does she say? She's like, we know this is Margot Robbie. Like, we're trying to convince you that Margot Robbie is
ugly.
is
Yeah.
ugly. Like, the movie's obviously, when they like writing the movie, they were aware of, I think, a lot of these potential criticisms.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, they're like, oh, we're gonna like acknowledge it with like a little like fourth wall breaking thing, but you're like, is that kind of worse? Because like you're admitting that that the movie's doing this, and like, so why not just not do it?
I feel like the only way that it will, like those moments, yes, I totally agree. But there's also like this moment specifically about the cellulite stuff. I kind of feel like it can work if you think of it as somebody who has not reached sort of like, not class consciousness, but like sort of, like feminist consciousness, and doesn't really understand like what the expectations she's like shying away from or like feeding into are actually doing. Because like you said, there's a fat Barbie, and like this is not a concern to stereotypical Barbie. Like that is not something that they talk about or whatever. But when she has to like deal with the idea that she might have imperfections or whatever, it starts becoming a little bit more like that. But
that's the confusing thing. Is that like, does fat Barbie have cellulite?
I think,
don't know.
Right.
And this is what I'm saying is that I think that it's like that she is starting to show the imperfections that a human person would.
Yeah.
She's becoming more complex, and thus she is showing flaws, and that becomes a thing. So like I don't think that fat Barbie probably does. I think that she is like the plastic sort of, you know. And so this like thing of like, oh, I have these blemishes is like what they were going for, but at the same
I
just wish they didn't use
different
that.
thing.
Yeah, just the choice
because
to use
again,
that. There's a lot of other.
it's blemish. Like it's like just framing it as that, which is why I think the feet thing makes much more sense, and like because no human has feet like that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, if you're trying to
framing it as an imperfection, framing it as a blemish is like but it's not.
Yeah.
Right. If you're trying to demonstrate the like transition from like plastic doll to human, I feel like there's other things. You know, why not? Acne or like
or like bags under your eyes or something weird, or just like a bad hair day or something like that. You know, like they could
I
have
like
done,
bad hair day.
Yeah.
Something just that feels a little less loaded.
Something that shows like less of a perfectly kept appearance instead of a physical blemish. You know what I mean? Like,
because it's not quite too. Like, you're like, are they trying to comment on this by having it be cellulite? But it's like not quite. It's not quite.
It's not quite complex enough to get
you're
there.
Like,
I think.
I don't know if they are.
It's just hard.
So she decides eventually to leave on her own in her Barbie car to go to Venice Beach in the real world to find the person who's playing with her. Ken decides to stow away, and they have this thing, and she's essentially like, this is just for me to go. This is not a you thing. Just stay out of this. And he's like, no, I really like, please, I won't be annoying. I'll do whatever you want, kind of like, I'll just be out of your way. And she's like, fine, whatever. Goes to the real world where they are in their roller skate outfit, which is, honestly, we had this conversation while I was happening. Everyone is looking at them like, what? Like weirdo, whatever. I bet if you went to Venice Beach in California and just walked around, you would see like 100 people in outfits way weirder than that. Like they just had sort of like a stylish highlighter tones, like jumpsuit, I guess. But like that was, I felt like that was sort of like, why are all these people looking at them like they're insane? Like, do they get put in prison because they look like that the first time? Like the cops arrest them?
No, it's because she punches.
Yeah, she punches the guy, and then
worker.
after they steal the outfits, so then they get arrested again.
Yeah. Which that was kind of a weird part in the movie to me, like the arresting thing. And I sort of was just like, what? Again, every moment in a movie, I just love when it feels like it's all intentional, and that felt like a joke, but not something that kind of looped into the rest of the movie, because the cops just kind of like let him go, and it has no consequence on the later bits of the movie. And
I think it was partially to show like, oh, you're in creepy land now, and like men are awful here, so they're going to be really creepy, even the people that are supposed to be, you know, quote unquote, protecting us. Of course, we know that cops don't. But
and then she has that moment afterwards where Ken's like, I'm gonna go check stuff out, because he's starting to be kind of clocked by people, like other men, and he's starting to feel sort of like a privilege, right? Like that he has never felt before.
She also has the moment at the bus stand.
That's what I was saying. So he goes away to like go find books on the patriarchy, and she sits down next to this woman who's just like an older woman, and she's like, "You are beautiful," and she's like, "I know."
She says, "I know it."
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of little moments that like that you don't see in movies, which are really, really nice. I was going to mention at the beginning when one of the Barbies, I think, is accepting the Nobel Prize, possibly, or like a Medal of Freedom, and she says, I earned it. You know, she doesn't say thank you. She doesn't say, you know, I couldn't have done it without all these other people. She says, I earned it.
Yeah.
And the same thing with, you know, she gives the compliment to the woman on the bench and she says, I know it. And I think that that's just such an important thing for women to see and for little girls to see.
Do you think that that was in the movie to show that there are bits of Barbie land that are in the real world as well?
Ooh.
like to show
That's
that
a good. That's a
to show that
yeah.
these places are different, but like that there are bits of each. Because later we see the real world start coming into Barbie land with the patriarchy and all that stuff and how everyone responds to that. But then you see these people who are in the real world who have that sort of like inner spark that the Barbies have in Barbie land. So I wonder if that was like the, Greta kind of showing this mentality, this self-assuredness.
Not all hope is lost.
Yeah, this light is in the real world as well, especially after Barbie just gets kind of like hammered down several times by kind of the realities of the world. What do you guys think?
I think it's also showing that while stereotypical Barbie is Margot Robbie, she looks like all the things that a woman is supposed to look like. She doesn't necessarily have that ingrained beauty standard, because when she looks at this woman, she says, "You're so beautiful."
Yeah, it's sort of like an appreciating of the like womanhood rather than like a male designed womanhood or like the expectation of womanhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Both of us look at Patrick.
Yeah, I agree. She is beautiful.
And she knows it.
Yeah.
That's a famous costume designer.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Yeah, I remember there was a lot of like weirdly misinformation about that scene online.
Yeah,
Afterwards,
they were like,
people
"Oh, it's the woman who created Barbie."
She invented Barbie, and people were like,
Like,
no,
no, she's
it's
dead.
It's a highly accomplished costume designer.
Yeah. And we kind of skipped it on accident because I forgot where we were. But I think either right before this or right after this, they go to the school because
I believe it's right after this.
right after because they're
after.
trying to find the woman who is playing with Barbie, the girl who's playing with Barbie,
Yes.
to try to get her to stop it with all the existential dread. And they kind of stumble upon who Barbie thinks is the one playing with her and her friends.
Who are meant to look like the Bratz dolls, I think.
Really?
I'd seen that online.
Yes.
That's very fun.
Which is funny because I played with both Barbies and Bratz dolls.
Yeah.
Wow.
Much too late. I had Bratz dolls when I was like 14, which is too old to be playing with dolls. But I loved both of them. And my Bratz dolls, they were a little sluts. But so were my Barbies. Like, that was the only thing that...
genitals.
That was like the only thing that my Barbies were doing.
Yeah. But like I really love the moment when Barbie is walking up and that little like the teenager walks up and goes, don't go up there. Like she will destroy you. It's like
Yes, I related
good.
to that
Yeah,
kid.
just like there's nothing more scary than a teenage girl.
So true. Very similar to Jennifer's body.
Yeah,
Yep.
very similar. But goes up and then this girl just sort of like rips Barbie's sort of thoughts about what she has contributed to the world apart, because the Barbies all think that they have solved sort of
There's no patriarchy.
there's no patriarchy. They've proven that a woman could be anything that she wants to be, and so they've done this for the real world as well. And so Barbie is kind of introduced to all of the bad things that have come from Barbies, and sort of has another little breakdown. But then
Mattel comes in.
Mattel comes to like sort of take her away, and Ken is just learning about horses, and he's like, again, this is the thing that I have to say about this movie is that the camera loves Ryan Gosling, and it is following the Kens around constantly. Like, I feel like this movie is called Barbie, but like the thing that stuck with me a lot, like the scenes I can just recall are like Ken scenes, because the dialogue feels really sharp in those.
They have the dance number.
What
is everyone wearing? The Kenergy sweatshirts.
Yep.
Like,
Who got the Oscar nom? Ryan Gosling.
Who did the musical
Who did
number?
the song.
Yeah, like it does feel a little weird that this was like such a. It is Barbie's movie, but they still sort of like put Ken in there quite a bit, which I think Jennifer's Body like completely avoided. Like all of the male characters in it feel expendable and feel just like add-ons to the main story about the women.
Yes.
And this one, it kind of feels like Ken is the main character as well, when I feel like it kind of should have probably just been Barbie. You know what I mean? Feels kind of weird.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously you have Ryan Gosling; he's a big star. So they're gonna put him in the movie. But yeah, it does. It is like who in terms of the lore, like Barbie as a cultural object, like no one really cares about Ken.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Did you have Kens
Yeah,
too?
of course. Who do you think the Barbies were having sex with?
Each
Besides
other,
each other.
and the brats. There was cross.
There wasn't really cross. No. The
And-
Barbies were too tall.
Yeah, height is the real big player
The
here.
brats were small, the Barbies were tall.
Yeah, so then Barbie is sort of brought into Mattel. Because Ken goes and finds, like, he goes to this gym. He walks around, like, a business center and is like, men rule the world. Like, I am a man, too. Like, I rule the world. And then he just goes back to Barbie Land. Before Barbie, correct?
Yes, because he
Yeah.
gets there and takes over everything.
Right. So he just goes back. And then Barbie gets taken by Mattel. And you find out that, like, the entirety of the Mattel board is all men. Will Ferrell is the lead. And they're all kind of this kind of hapless, sort of stupid people.
They're
But
not portrayed as evil, even though...
just like stupid.
Just dumb.
Yeah.
Which right, because it's Will Ferrell, which is a choice. How do we feel about Will Ferrell in this movie?
I feel like going back to your thought of like in the Andor thing of like trickling like a message through a company, like I feel like it was a very strategic choice of making these people feel exactly how we felt of like they're hapless, they're not evil. It's like, no.
And clearly, Mattel had to approve everything.
Yes.
And so I'm sure they said, well, of course we're going to make the whole board of directors men. And I'm sure that they didn't like that. And so as a sort of, deal, they were like, well, we'll give you Will Ferrell as the main, the CEO so that, you don't seem like the
I have a sense
evil
I think I'm
corporation that
pretty
you
funny.
actually probably are.
Yeah, and then also like all when the CEO people are like running around, they're silly, you know what I mean? They like are easily scared. They're not hyper masculine. They feel very like non-threatening, even though they're supposed to be like this thing that's chasing Barbie around.
The podcast hosted by two wise trees. Do you remember that line?
That's such a good fucking line.
I don't know who says that.
It's one of the board members.
One of the board members, who is the actor, is the brother of what's her name from What We Do in the Shadows?
Oh, really?
Nadja.
Yeah.
Her brother in real life.
That's so funny.
Is like the second in command.
The one in the sling?
He has dark hair.
Yeah, and
he's also in Fleabag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has a thing where he's like our product lines have been doing so well or whatever, and then one of them that he names is a podcast hosted by two.
No, it's not. It's not. He was like, that's what's a stranger thing that could happen? And he says a podcast hosted by two wise trees. And then he says an entire choir of young fathers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the lines in this movie are fucking on point.
The
There's some
Mattel
great
scenes,
comedy.
turn more into the like absurd, where it is like, especially even like the geography of the building and the chase scene through the building, like is this weird turn into.
In a way, it feels kind of like Barbie Land in a way, because like the warehouse that is the cubicle farm feels like this kind of endless liminal space. And
Right.
like it kind of feels like magical realism, even though it is supposed to be this corporate building.
Yeah.
But then it is
And
magical realism because she meets.
Yeah.
She goes through the door.
That's like on the 9th floor, has a suite in the 9th floor or whatever.
Yeah, she meets the creator of Barbie.
Yeah. So Barbie's running away from the Mattel folks who want her to get back in her box.
Right.
Which is, very heavy-handed symbolism there. But then she runs away, and Gloria, who is, we find out later, the actual person who is playing with the Barbie.
America Ferrera.
Which is Sophie's mom. Is it Sophie? Or
Sasha.
Sasha's mom, who is like, feels like an uncool mom and is thinking about death because she's getting older and like wants to be like hip and young with her daughter and just doesn't feel that anymore. And so that's where all these feelings have come from. And so then Margot Robbie is like, okay, come to Barbie Land and like you'll see how.
Are you going to talk about the Ruth Handler part?
That's not played for anything at the beginning. It's
I think it's
basically
important.
she runs in, she meets this kind of magical witchy person who's like, oh, just stay in here for a little while. Oh, they're coming, get out of here, run away. And she's like, oh,
it's important.
and you're like, oh, that'll be something that comes back later. But you have no context into who this person was.
Okay, true.
Just feels kind of weird. And then they all decide to go back to Barbie Land.
Do we get the? I don't want to miss this. I can't remember if it was. I think it's before they go back to Barbie Land. The incredibly thrilling car chase that happens.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
This is
now,
the
yes.
scene that I wanted to put a pin in and
Okay,
come back
let's
to.
talk about it.
Because you're watching the movie and you're like, this is a fun little Barbie movie, and then suddenly you're like, we're in a Chevy commercial. What the hell is happening? It's shot like a car
It's
commercial.
weird.
It's
like
jarring.
you cannot see them when you see the shots of the car driving outside. It's definitely not them in the car. Like
No.
you can't even tell it's them.
Right. And it's like, that's the part where I'm like, where it like takes me out of it. And I'm like, oh, we're watching, this whole movie's a commercial. This is a commercial inside of the commercial. But the whole movie's just this like commodified item. It just bummed me out because I was like, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because you were talking about some other critics that you were listening to were saying like, you can't tackle feminism without tackling capitalism, and because of the
And white supremacy.
the way that this movie was funded and made, obviously, like they have several corporations that are basically backing this movie like back to front. So it's sort of like, can you do the story that you need to in that context? I'm not sure. I wonder what like an independent version of Barbie would have been.
I don't know
what
if
I mean?
Yeah. Definitely be very different.
That's the thing, is it can't exist.
Yeah.
And so you're like, and I think that's the other, like there are infinite worse versions of this movie.
Yes.
That
This-
could get made.
yes.
Yes.
And
I think it's definitely a step forward.
No, for sure. Yeah. I was a fan. I really enjoyed the movie. But I feel like it raises all these questions because you're like, what am I watching?
Yeah, exactly.
I think the weakest part of this movie, like structure-wise, is the plot.
Yeah.
Like there's just things that don't really make sense and things that don't really pay off.
It's visually very fun to watch.
Yes.
It's interesting the whole
dialogue's
way through.
great. It's
Dialogue
funny.
is fast.
Yeah, as a broad comedy, it works
Yeah.
really well, which I think is pretty. Thinking of like Greta Gerwig as like, it's interesting, and like coming from her career before that, she's not
known for comedy.
right. She's doing like starts in like indie dramas
Yeah.
and stuff, and then obviously does Little Women. So it is interesting. Like I feel like normally, like we talked earlier, the trajectory is like you do indie dramas, now you get to do this massive like superhero movie, and this is obviously a massive movie, but the fact that it is like a broad comedy, and like I feel like she's a great comedy writer. Like the jokes,
Yeah.
The jokes hit.
there's a lot of like
so many
really
good
good,
jokes.
sharp and like specific jokes too, like
And weird jokes,
Yeah.
which are great.
And also like a lot of very funny physical jokes too, like the whole Ken fight that we're coming up on. Like that whole thing is hilarious. It's just like machismo gone wild, but to the silliest point it
Yes.
can be.
Yeah.
but not violent even a little bit, except one guy does get shot. Somehow one of the Mattel executives somehow gets shot for real, even though nobody has a gun, which is a great detail.
Yeah, it's very silly. One thing I will say about the car chase, though, is that it does, I think maybe it's in there because it gives agency and power to the Gloria character, like the mom, because she's not this kind of, chained to her desk, unimportant, uncapable person. She can stunt drive, apparently.
Yes.
And do all this stuff. So it's like
That's true.
maybe that's in there as well to show that like she is empowered in that way.
and she leased a brand new Chevy for only 0% down, 0% APR.
This podcast is sponsored by Chevy.
The Chevy Bolt. Did you know that the Chevy Bolt can act as a generator for your house in times of need? Well, Chevy Bolt is there for your family. Anyway, so
Someone give us a Chevy.
yeah, please. But then they go back to Barbie Land to like bring her back to show her Barbie Land and how awesome it is. And Kens have turned it into like Ken Land essentially.
It's horrible.
And it's bad. I'm gonna
Jojo Casa House, etc. You've
Joke
seen the
after
film.
joke after joke of basically just amping up the sort of like masculine like chic, I guess.
Right, but they also misinterpret
Yes.
the patriarchy of the real world.
Yeah.
Which is also an interesting choice. Like it plays it well for the comedy of it, but
Like it isn't violent. or anything.
Right, exactly.
And it's not like sexual subjugation. Because like the Kens are idiots and they're fine. Like they're not evil. So what they do is sort of like they take the kind of memes of the patriarchy of like let me play this like
The Godfather.
the Godfather and like let me play this acoustic guitar at you or let me explain this to you or
Brewski.
whatever. Brewskis, horses, all that kind of stuff. So they kind of take the memes of like, and I guess it is showing how silly it is, like in a way of if you took somebody with no knowledge of like gender dynamics and just like had them sort of absorb the culture and then been like, wow, I guess horses are super important, like men on horses. They run the world. And then like this is what you get out of it, I guess, is a way to like, I don't know, take some power away from the patriarchy while still showing that it is poisonous because it has kind of corrupted this world in a way that is not like is not good. I found it interesting that all the Barbies just sort of went along with it. I felt like that was like an interesting choice by Greta. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We don't really get to see the swap. Like it's all kind of it's happened, and then we get there, and the Barbies are already brainwashed into this new way of living. Yeah. So we don't really get to see what happens when the Kens take over, which is interesting.
Right. I think that speaks to some of the issues with the plot of the movie, where it does feel like they were like, well, for the sake of the plot, this needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so we're not
going to show you how
we're not going to show you how it happened, because then we would have to some way justify and explain
like how the president
why they just
down.
let it happen.
Yeah.
And they're like,
it doesn't really make sense.
Right. We'll just not touch it.
But here's the thing that makes me be like, this is why I think that the movie was like almost too male centric in some ways. The character that is able to recognize the patriarchy and actively make a choice against it is Alan, who is is a male character.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like makes me go like, huh? Because like you have all these like very accomplished, intelligent Barbies that are like set up at the beginning to be these like really important and influential people within this world, and you have Alan, who is like fine, but it's sort of like, weird that there's no other Allens, and like that kind of stuff like is around but not important, and he's the one who is able to sort of break the hold on. I don't know, I just felt weird. I mean,
I wouldn't say he's the one to break the hold, but I would say he definitely is.
Well, he is not.
He's an ally, and he's not being like sucked into the
and he's not
world
brought
of the Kens.
into the dynamics.
Yeah.
And I get, again, it's like what you were saying, Patrick, about how like the plot needs this to happen, sort of thing. Like in order for the metaphor to work, the ally character has to be somebody who is able to break free of the tropes.
Yeah.
And so it kind of has to happen, but does it make a whole lot of sense? Not really. So they go back. Kens have taken over everything. They kind of have a fight with Barbie because Barbie just wants to give up, and the mom and daughter just decide to leave, and they're like leaving, and Alan comes up and is like, don't make me go back, I can't do another like leather couch. Like this place sucks. And then they have Alan just like beat the hell out of like 10 Barbies as they decide whether they're going to try to cross back into the real world.
Construction workers.
Yeah, but they're all Kens.
Yeah, you said Barbie.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kens.
Alan would not fight a Barbie.
But they're all Kens trying to build a wall, which I think was sort of like a loose thing at like Trumpism, maybe.
Yeah.
But they're building it just straight up.
Yeah, but like just wait until they figure out how to build it side to side or whatever. Again, very good lines in this movie, very funny. But like that felt like a weird moment.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the weaker bits of the movie is I don't understand. Like every time I've watched the movie, I've been like, why are they leaving? And then why is Alan there? And then why? And they start to leave, and then they immediately go back, and it feels so throwaway.
Yeah, it's sort of a thing where, again, as a screenwriter is working, you try to make sure that every scene has like a very important bit, and it's very clear in this movie that some scenes are just to progress this kind of mess of a plot a little bit. Yeah. Like this one with Alan is to progress the plot and get them to come back with Alan with a plan. You know what I mean? And
I guess.
So it's sort of like, because otherwise that scene, like you said, could be just taken out. They could just never leave, and they could have just been convinced Barbie where she was. You know what I mean? But they go back, they get Barbie, and they go to Weird Barbie and the sugar daddy Ken and stuff like that. And then the kind of discontinued
The pooping
ones.
dog.
The pooping dog. And they...
And is the cock ring Ken in that scene?
Yes.
About the cock ring Ken?
Yeah, but what's his? Oh, it's like magic earring Ken.
Oh, yeah.
Very
I haven't
funny.
heard him called cock ring Ken.
Yeah, it's like a real thing.
I'm not a sugar daddy. I'm Sugar's daddy.
Oh, boy.
It's great. And then the one with the TV screen on the back.
Yeah, like, what am I? But there's, like, they basically get all the misfit toys and they decide to go and deprogram all the Barbies.
America Ferrera gives her famous feminist speech.
Yes.
Which is
Do we wanna
very, as many people have said, very feminist 101, but also probably something that many, many people need to hear who still don't think that feminism is a thing.
Yeah.
Patrick, what were you going to say?
I was going to ask if we wanted to talk about the speech, because I feel like, the speech is a big pivotal scene in the movie where it kind of
She did it
states
many times, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, this feels bad to say. I find it completely forgettable.
Oh.
I don't even remember that she gave a speech. What I remember
Really?
is that the deprogramming of the Barbies is like, you're a Nobel Peace Prize person. You like this and you don't like this, and they're like, oh, I don't.
That's not
like
the
Kens.
deprogramming, though.
When
That's
they're
not what
in
they
the-
say to deprogram them.
What did they say?
She kind of continues on with things that could have been in that speech.
Gotcha.
That's
Yes.
how they
I
deprogram the
remember
Barbies.
this now, yeah.
They don't just say like, "Hey, you're a doctor," and like shake
Yeah.
it, because that doesn't work.
Yeah.
They have to say like, if you wear something that's too low cut, you're a slut. But if you wear a turtleneck, then you're a prude. And
Yeah.
they sort of wake them up to the reality of how hard it is to be a woman.
Yes, I
Right.
remember this now. Yeah, like I said, I maybe it's because it felt so sort of flat in that it doesn't say anything super deep to me that I
Maybe
didn't
just
remember
because
as
you
well.
don't relate to what she's
No,
No, it's because he's Nick's a woke king. Didn't need to hear it.
I am an owlet.
No, it feels in the movie. It feels like America Ferrera is turning to camera and is
Yeah.
like, "This is the thesis of the movie.
Yeah.
This is the big point." And I'm fine with, like, I think it was, like you said, I think it was necessary to have that in this movie. I honestly think, and for all the issues with the plot, I feel like it works well in the context of the plot, like to the point where it does feel very pointed to have this big speech. Like, it makes sense in the development. And yeah, I don't know. I support it. Woke ally, I guess.
Couple of Allens over here.
And so then they like wake enough Barbies up out of it so that they can turn the Kens against each other, because patriarchy eventually always is going to turn against each other because power requires you to subjugate someone, essentially. And so there are factions of Kens that happen because they all think that the Barbies that they like are interested in other Kens. And so then they have this beach war and all this other silly stuff that's amazing.
Is that when the dance number happens?
Yeah, it's
The beach war goes into the dance number?
Yeah, and then they start doing their song and the dance number, which is great. It did feel a little La La Land to me.
It's very La La Land. It's very An American in Paris.
Yes.
It's very Singing in the Rain.
Yeah.
Is it Singing in the Rain, or is it more? I think it's more An American in Paris, where they have like those, grand sound stages with the colors and.
Yeah.
Yep. And then
And the outfit,
the outfit.
the black, and that I feel like is very much.
I also thought it was really interesting that this movie, because the way that they restore Barbie Land is by basically voting on the Constitution, the Barbie Constitution. I feel like, again, going back to sort of like the first level of radicalization or whatever, like this feels like feminism without any sort of like radical politics of like undoing the system. The system cannot be fixed by the system. You have to destroy the system.
Right.
And instead it's like, if we all just go and vote, then we can restore Barbie Land.
But I mean, they have a good system, is the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean,
Like there
originally-
are countries that have universal health care.
Yeah, but
that is possible.
But originally, the Kens were being subjugated in a way. They were not thought of as like full members of this society. They were accessories, which I think at the end of the movie they have figured out a way to not. They magically kind of have a thing where the Kens feel good about how everything ended up, and the Barbies have regained power and also feel good about how everything ended up. And so it's like, yay, we did it. But there is a point of like, I wonder if that's super, realistic within the general scope of it. But anyway, so they have this war that allows the Barbies to go in and
claim power.
Yeah, reclaim power and vote on their constitutions. And then Ken sort of like comes and has like this moment with Barbie where Barbie's sort of like, I'm sorry I treated you badly. And he was like,
why is she apologizing?
Yeah, which felt kind of weird. But then also like Ken goes to like kiss her and she's like, no, man, like this is the whole point is that you don't have to be like tied up with this relationship or with me. Like you are somebody on your own. And so it kind of has like a which I think probably resonates for a lot of like young 20-year-old men kind of thing of like having their value put in like their relationship, and they form their identities based on who they are attached to in a lot of ways. Like I resonated with that sort of idea, but I think that it kind of felt a little shoehorned in there a little bit. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it's... I don't know. Yeah, that whole aspect of the movie's played interestingly, and I'm not sure if it does much with it. Because you have this idea that Barbie and Ken are inherently paired, but there is like this constant thing of they don't really know what sex is, or like they're basing this off some expectation. So it's like unclear if like the Ken is trying to do what he thinks is like the performative version of this relationship, or if he's actually like trying to have sex with Barbie and she's turning him away. Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know, it's like not, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's like clearly articulated in a way that like makes a strong point either way about it to me.
Makes an argument.
Yeah. I don't remember like feeling that. I just remember it was one of the things in the plot that I was kind of like, what was that? What was that supposed to be exactly? But I don't know.
Yeah.
And I feel like that ties somewhat into like a critique I've seen of the movie from the feminist perspective, that there is no, like, when she like comes into the human world, there's like very little acknowledgement of her like sex or menstruation or like being a like human woman in that way.
Yeah, in fact, she says the opposite until the very end, where
she's a Barbie when she comes into the real world.
Right.
She's not. And, the whole, we could talk about the end.
Well, first, let's just get to the end. So the Barbara Handler, or Ruth Handler,
Ruth Handler.
comes in, who is it turns out, is the weird witchy woman that we saw earlier in the Mattel building. And she's the ghost of the creator of Barbie, who lives in the Mattel building and has problems with the IRS.
Yeah, lots of tax evasion.
Which I thought was very funny that they kind of slipped that in there a couple times.
Yeah, that's true.
But basically, she takes Barbie into this all-white room and is like, Barbie is not a fixed thing. It will always be evolving, and you have no limits on you. And there's this like kind of montage of sort of like young women doing stuff, like on swings in a park.
That's when we cry.
Yeah, Alice was crying at that part.
I've cried every time at that part.
Yeah. And then she sort of embraces her desire to become a woman and leaves Barbie Land behind and becomes a woman. And the final scene in the movie is her going to her first kind of ecological appointment.
Correct.
Which is a weird way to end it, I feel like.
It's very gender essentialist.
It also is just like such a base level joke to sacrifice for. Like, the joke is for the audience to, at the very end, for her to be like, I'm gonna go to the gynecologist, and everyone being like, Miss Barbie's never been to a gynecologist
I feel like
before.
it's played though, like watching it for the first time, you think she's going in for a job interview.
Yeah.
And so that's the joke is you're like, because you're watching it and you're like, oh God, is that how it's going to end? Is like she becomes a human and so she
gets a job.
Yeah, she gets a job. You're like, and so then you're like, oh, she's going to the gynecologist.
Yeah.
So I feel like it works on that level, seeing it for the first time. But yeah, maybe like once you think about it.
You could say a lot of different things about it.
Yeah.
What I've heard is that the reason Greta Gerwig wanted that is because like she wanted to show that like it's to sort of celebrate going to the gynecologist as something that's like, because Barbie's so excited and it's like something that she gets to do as a human woman. But it's hard.
So I want to
because it also is like all women don't go to the gynecologist. It's just like
I want to hear a lot from you, Alice, on this. But first, Patrick, what is your general feeling about this movie?
I enjoyed Barbie a lot. I saw it in theaters during the early part of the run, so I saw it in a full theater. People were dressed up. It was a super fun theater-going experience. I think I saw it in the same week as Oppenheimer, and I thought Oppenheimer was a good movie, but I was like, Barbie was a better theater-going experience. Like, I enjoyed that more.
For as much as Chris Nolan is like, these movies have to be seen in the theater, Barbie ended up being a better movie theater experience.
For me,
Agreed.
for me personally,
Agreed. Yes,
I just enjoyed
definitely.
it more. And yeah, I think for what it is, for what the movie is, and like what it's able to do within the constraints of being a gigantic blockbuster toy commercial, like I really love how weird it is. I love the humor in it. Yeah. I think it is able to say some interesting things. I think it's a bit of a mess plot wise. There's obviously a lot that it doesn't say, so then I'm like, I don't know if that really makes it like a complete object in terms of being like a strong like ideological text in any way.
Yeah.
But no, overall, I liked it a lot. I think Greta Gerwig too. I feel like I actually haven't seen Little Women, but I know, I'm sorry, but I love Lady Bird. I think Lady Bird's like one of the best movies.
What about Francis Ha?
I'm just gonna Francis Ha you
Kill him!
But I want to see more of what Greta Gerwig's gonna do, and although she is making a Narnia movie next. I'm curious to see what she does with it. I'm hoping that she's still able to
I'll still see it.
That's the thing too, is it's like this could have been, for it being this massive toy commercial movie.
It could have been bad, and it wasn't. It's not bad.
It could have been bad.
It could have stalled her career out. You know what I mean?
Right, and it also could have had if they hired, like they could have easily hired some journeyman director who isn't going to leave any auteur imprint on it. They're just going to make the toy movie like a Transformer, even though Michael Bay has his Michael Bay things. Transformers is a movie about Transformers.
Right.
And so I appreciate that she's getting to make these big movies, but I'm also like, give me another Lady Bird.
Yeah.
Lady Bird 2.
I felt like this movie, so my viewing experience is that I missed it in its run because Alice and I were going to go together, but then Alice had an opportunity to go without me, and I don't blame her at all for leaving me behind. But so I didn't end up seeing it until fairly recently, and so I had absorbed all of the hype and all of the stuff about what everyone loved about this movie. And when I saw it, I was a little bit underwhelmed by it because I think that I was expecting something like mind-blowing, but I have almost the same feelings. Like, I love how silly this movie is. I love the dialogue. I love that it isn't just a realism movie. Like, I love that it takes weird choices and just folds it in. It is a little bit of a mess when it comes to the plot, but I never really minded that. The whole way through, I was like, this is a fun ride. I was very conscious of the fact that, Alice, you were crying beside me, and I was like, I don't feel anything right here. And I think that is also because this movie, there's a part of this movie, and this is why I wanted you to also have the last word, Alice, is that, like, this movie is not for us, Patrick. Like, this movie is very much for a specific demographic that we just do not intersect with. Yep. And so I think that we can't get the full experience of this movie, and that is okay. I was like very much like, this is the this is how I was feeling in that moment.
Right.
Like, this movie is not for me, but not in a way that like I shouldn't be watching this movie or I don't like this movie. It's like, oh, I'm just never going to be able to get the full experience of this thing.
Because 99% of other movies are for us.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's why that, any problems we have with the plot, any, strange things about, it being like centered on these two white people, like, there's so many movies about men. And there's so many critically acclaimed movies that people hold up as the
like
greatest
Raging Bull. I hate
greatest
that movie.
movies of all time that have no women characters or one woman character, and I don't care about them at all. I don't connect to them emotionally whatsoever, and they are nothing to me.
And so
I don't care about boxing. I don't care about war. Stop doing it. Stop making movies about those things. They're terrible.
Yeah.
I don't care about the atomic bomb. Well, I shouldn't say that, but I don't care about Oppenheimer.
For this movie,
For its
I
faults,
do want to.
I don't care. It's. I'm so glad we have it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I think it's a fun movie. I'm glad I saw it. I think that this is like you were saying earlier, like a base level text to like feminism or just sort of like feminist theory, or just like, for me, what it feels like is if you see it and like it, you should be comfortable at the end saying like, yeah, like I think that there is something wrong with like gender politics in the real world that we should all work together to fix. And that is why I think that the criticisms to this movie mostly are entirely crazy. Like all the men who are like, this is a movie about hating men. It's like, this movie spent so much time with men, like holding their hands. Yeah, it's like literally like, Jesus Christ. Like people just need to shut up a little bit. And also when people are like, Barbie, it's like, no, this movie is actually really funny. Like this movie has a lot of humor, and the fact that they are Barbies is sort of like, it is the plot, but we've already talked about how the plot is just sort of to get us from scene to scene sometimes.
Right. And I think also, like, comparing it to Jennifer's Body, you think about both of these are movies that are written and made by women for women about female experiences. And you have Jennifer's Body, which I don't think was a very successful movie at the box office.
No, and it was marketed to men.
It was marketed to men. They were like, we don't know what to do with this movie. And I think, I'm not saying under no circumstances do you have to hand it to the Warner Brothers Corporation. But for this movie, they were like, this is a Barbie movie. It's for women. It made $1 billion. And you're like,
I think it's the 14th or 13th highest grossing movie of all time now.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, I just like can't think of any other, because they're like, wow, women go to the movies. Like,
Can people stop saying that?
outside of like, I guess there's like Twilight and like 50 Shades. I'm thinking of like other big blockbuster movies that were marketed
Towards women.
specifically, like, or not specifically, primarily towards women.
But even like things like
But
Mad
those
Max
aren't good
Fury Road.
movies. Right.
This is a
those
good
are,
movie.
Right. Those are like camp. Like people go see it because it's like camp and like.
Yeah.
But this is the thing too, is like Mad Max Fury Road is a great movie. I really love that movie. It's an action movie. The main character arguably is Furiosa, who is like basically the female protagonist, and the movie is centered on a group of women for most of the movie, but it is still marketed as like Mad Max for men. Like I feel like there is something special in that this movie was just been like, this is for women by women, and like you don't go see it if you don't care about that stuff. You know what I mean? Which I think is at least progress from Jennifer's Body's time, because I think that if we had a different marketing campaign, I don't know if the success would have been different, but I think that the movie would have been considered differently, which I
but it's
wish
also
it
not
happened.
a rom-com.
Exactly. But this is the thing.
Right.
Which is nice.
Like Patrick and I have sort of said our bits, but I want you to just have the open mic to kind of talk about Barbie, but also that both of these movies, and then maybe at the end we can kind of like pop in and talk about what this brings up. But
Pressure.
The microphone is yours. Hot mic, baby.
I don't know. I think I love movies about women, and I'm so glad that we have more and more of them. It still feels like these last 10 Oscar movies, there were still only 4, I would say, that were really about women.
Out of what, 12?
10. Is that, I don't know if that's correct, but I liked the ones that were about women, and those are the ones that were my favorites. I certainly didn't connect with Jennifer's Body as emotionally as I did with Barbie, but I think that makes sense. It's gory, it's a horror movie, it's much more visceral, it's much more about trauma. So, whereas Barbie's a little softer. But, you know, Barbies are important. Like, they're growing up as a girl, they're important to us. It's like, you know, it's the thing that we play with, and it's how we connect with our friends, and it's how we like learn about life. And so I think I want to stress the fact that it's made bigger than a commercial.
Yeah.
Because we have an emotional attachment to the toy.
Yeah.
So it's not the Matchbox Cars movie.
Yeah.
Like I think that there's a difference between Barbie and other toys.
Yeah. And I think that to that point, you get a lot of people who love the Batman movies, and we don't straight up consider those as like advertisements for Batman products, even though it is sort of a commercial product. But essentially it is sort of the same thing of like most like kids that grew up in the 90s probably had some sort of action figure Batman toy at some point, you know what I mean? And so there's like an emotional connection, there's a familiarity, there's like some part of you that resonates with that, and I think that probably that's a very similar experience.
Yeah, and people aren't being like, oh well, the Dark Knight, that's just your action figure.
Right.
But they would say that about Barbie.
Right.
So yeah, I think they're both really important movies. I think Jennifer's Body has a lot of interesting things to say about the violence of teenage girls and how it feels like they can be very powerful, and our friendships can feel very intoxicating and very scary, but also very exciting. And the closeness that you feel with a best friend. I think I was going to say this earlier when you were like, they don't have any other friends. That feels very scary when you're a teenager, because when you're a teenager, all you have is the people that you're in school with.
Yeah.
And if you've ever gone through a period where you didn't have any friends at school,
I wouldn't know what that felt like.
when you're eating lunch in the bathroom, like, it's the worst feeling in the world. So when you only have one friend, and that's the friend that you have to rely on, like, you cling to that person so stringently, so so strongly, because you would be completely lost without them, and they're your entire social world. And when it's somebody as powerful and beautiful as Jennifer, then it makes sense that you'd be so intoxicated by them.
Yeah. I feel like for me, the difference between these movies is that Barbie is a celebration of womanhood in whatever like kind of base level way. It's just sort of like, it kind of feels like a campaign slogan in some way, where it doesn't go super deep, but it gets the point across. Like, we should celebrate women.
Yeah,
and like,
it's not really about friendship, though.
Yeah, and then I think that Jennifer's Body is like a primal like scream into the night. You know what I mean? Very different vibes. Like, I think that Jennifer's Body is much more like full of rage and full of like kind of a visceral emotion of like I mean, it ends with like a bloody revenge on everyone who did it to them, and in a way and that's like one of the most satisfying parts of the movie, and it's like her murdering 5 people, you know what I mean? Whereas in Barbie, I feel like when I ended, I was like, I feel good. Like, I feel good about everything. Yeah. And so, like, very different tones. So it's kind of hard to match them because they are on the same topic, but they have such different perspectives. What do you think, Patrick?
I was just looking, because I was trying to remember what the line was. I think it's the first line of the movie in Jennifer's Body is, "Hell is a teenage girl." Yeah. And I feel like, if the America Ferrera speech in Barbie is that movie's thesis, I feel like Jennifer's Body, that's the thesis. Yeah. Of just like, it's more like I feel like Jennifer's Body that has less of, like, Barbie does feel like it's trying to deliver you a message. There's a singular message it's trying to get across, and it does it pretty.
It feels like if Jennifer's Body is a scream, Barbie is a yell. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like
or
a hurrah.
Like
Well, I don't even know if it's necessarily a hurrah, because I do think in the America Forever speech, like there is like a.
I think it's
hey,
more like a chant, like a chant at a women's march.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like things are not okay,
Yeah.
but there's hope and things can get better. Whereas
there's,
like Jennifer's body is like.
Right. Well, that's it.
Barbie is the beginning of the march, and Jennifer's Body is the end when like tear gas is being thrown and people
Or when they get to the they storm the Supreme Court building and
hell yeah.
hang Brett Kavanaugh. Sorry. Is
Oh,
that
if
an endorsement
only.
to hang Brett Kavanaugh? We're not encouraging. And like it's too. Barbie's like there's solidarity in this. We are there's a group of women. This is a diverse coalition of Barbies.
Yeah, it is very
here.
coalition building. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I think like you said, Jennifer's Body is I think kind of we touched on before, like is a movie also about like loneliness in a lot of ways, because it is this small town where she has no one else. They clearly don't have like any other family around. All Needy has is Jennifer and Chip, and
And her absentee mom, Amy Sedaris.
And Chip kind of he's barely there. So like
He's such
He's pretty
like
milquetoast.
he's very much like half a person. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But yeah, so which one do you think comes out of the cage as the winner of this movie versus movie?
God, that's so hard.
I have an opinion, but I want to hear yours first, Patrick.
Ooh, I go first.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. Like, do we
They're so
want to
different.
pick what we're defining it on?
Okay, so let's do 3 categories. Like we can say
Whoa.
the better movie in our minds, the best on the theme,
and which one we liked to watch.
which one we liked
to watch more.
the best,
Okay.
But one can be a better movie. Like Raging Bull is held up as one of the best made movies in the world. I hate that fucking movie. Raging Bull is something that I hope we never have to talk about again. So I'll talk about it. But,
Yeah, let's not.
but let's go off those 3 categories and see what we think.
Better movie. I almost feel like it's a bit of a tie for me. I think if we go on my Letterboxd ratings, I think I gave Jennifer's Body 3.5. I think I gave Barbie 4.
Yeah.
I think both though are like really strong, kind of like auteur-minded visions. I mean, I know Jennifer's Body wasn't directed by Diablo Cody, but
Was directed by a woman, though.
yeah, it was directed by a woman. It it has a strong voice, and I think that's something that I always appreciate in a movie, when it just has like a consistent. Even like Jennifer's Body, I think is more consistent, has a consistency of like tone and like what it's trying to do. So I think they're both kind of tied there, because I think like we talked about before. I'm like, I don't know if Barbie's a well-constructed movie in certain ways with the plot and stuff. Like it is a little messy, but there's a lot of like really well done stuff in there. In terms of, what was the second category?
The best on the theme.
Best on the theme. This one's also hard. I think.
Gotcha, motherfucker. This is what being on a podcast is all about, making really big statements on stuff that you're not really sure about.
I think, I mean, again, it's just like different. I think it depends. If someone like came up and asked me, like, I want to watch a movie that is about women and has something to say about women, which should I watch? I think it would depend on who's asking me too.
I'd probably give them a different movie besides these 2.
Really? I think if like just like surface level, I would be like, yeah, Barbie. There's something there, but Jennifer's Body, I feel like I would recommend to specific people that I be like, just give them a little heads up going in.
And then your favorite.
My favorite, I think Barbie. I think I like Barbie. Like I said, the theater experience was really fun watching it. Jennifer's Body is fun. It's funny. I think it probably lost a half star for all the R slurs.
Yeah, that's tough.
It's just like a thing when you watch it. That's the other thing is like you recommend it to someone. You're like, just so you know though.
The book that I was telling you about, that really funny, that reminds me of Jennifer's Body, also had the R slur in it, and that came out in like 2018 or 19.
Jeez.
And so I had to knock a star off on Goodreads for it, because otherwise
Damn.
I would have given it 5 stars.
But yeah.
Sheesh.
So I guess Barbie comes out on top for me because it was kind of a tie, somewhat in two categories, and then
This is going to
Barbie
be
wins in
so
the third.
good because I think that I'm going to kind of go the other way, and then Alice can break the tie because I think for my first category, I think I had the opposite of you where I did Jennifer's Body as a 4 and a Barbie as a 3.5. I'm pretty sure. Just because I feel like Jennifer's Body is just more complex and is, like you said, like it has such a clear tone, and I remember so many shots and so much of that movie, even though I only saw it once and I saw it before I saw Barbie, and more of Barbie is kind of a mush in my head. What I remember most about Barbie are the fun, specific shots that Greta Gerwig used, like when they're throwing all the clothes out of the house and it's like showing the price value or like what part of the Barbie set it came from. Very fun. And like the battle on the beach and like all the different things that are just like kind of shot with such a silly tone, but it's like a very specific vision. Like all of that is great in Barbie, and I love it so much. I just think that I feel that throughout the whole movie in Jennifer's Body, and I feel that only in part of Barbie. When it comes to the theme, I think that Barbie, like I said, is just like a little less complex than Jennifer's Body. Like Jennifer's Body brings in trauma, it brings in the effect of the patriarchy upon women. It shows how it can destroy not only the like yourself, but it can destroy your fellow friendships and the place and people around you. It kind of shows like how men, like how the patriarchy can also destroy men because like they fall into this thing and they're killed. And there's like a lot of like, I would watch Jennifer's Body again for a deeper reading. Barbie, I kind of feel like I could definitely watch it again because it's just an enjoyable ride. I'm not sure if I would pull much more out of it. And I hate saying this because I feel like all of the men who are like Barbie fucking sucks or whatever, but I don't feel that way. It's just like I think that for me, Jennifer's Body felt more visceral. What is my favorite movie? I think Jennifer's Body, which is weird because I don't like horror movies. But I didn't find it very. I felt like it was more of a thriller. I felt like it was interesting. It was kind of a mystery, which I like. But I think Barbie made me laugh way more. So take that for what you wish.
So what was the first category?
So it is
better movie.
Oh, better movie.
better
Okay.
movie.
It's so hard to say. Unfortunately, I do think the plot of Jennifer's Body is better.
Yeah.
Which fits the theme better? I think Jennifer's Body.
Yeah, I think so, maybe.
But which one do I want to watch more? Barbie. Which one do I emotionally connect with? Barbie. Which one have I seen 3 times and
Barbie.
twice in theaters? Barbie. Which one did I give more stars to on Letterboxd? Barbie.
All right. So well then,
So,
after hearing
I
both
think
of
it's a
our
tie.
arguments and yours, I'm going to ask you
No.
lift up a winner in the movie versus movie. If you truly believe that these are tied.
I think it's Jennifer's Body, actually.
Holy shit.
Because which one am I thinking about later more? Which one has more subtle meaning baked in? Jennifer's Body.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
But I also, women and gender studies was one of my minors in college, so it's something I've thought a lot about. So nothing new was new to me in Barbie in terms of the message that they were pushing.
Right.
But which one do I want to watch more? Barbie.
That follow-up question, if someone did ask you, I want to watch a movie about women, the female experience, what would you say?
I really like the movie Now and Then.
Now and Then.
Which is kind of like Girls Stand By Me.
Okay.
You were telling me about this.
Yeah, so I recently rewatched Stand By Me with my dad, and I was like, wait, why would you ever watch Stand By Me when you could watch Now and Then?
Yeah.
Because it's like about growing up. It's about 4 best friends. They kind of have to solve a mystery, but they're all going through hard things in their lives at the same time. Like one of them is dealing with the death of her mom. One of them is dealing with the divorce of her parents. So I don't know. Frances Ha is another good one.
Lady Bird.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Booksmart. I don't know.
No, these are good.
Those are
These
my
are good.
examples.
Well, so it sounds like the winner of today's movie versus movie is now and then.
Check it out.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed this first movie versus movie back. We are going to be doing a monthly movie versus movie where we compare two movies on a theme, and then we're also going to do one episode a month of just us talking about what we are watching, what we are reading, what we are thinking about lately. We'll have our guest on, and Patrick and I will be hitting your feeds very soon with some more movie versus movie. Anything you want to say, Patrick? This is you're on the cast now. You're a full-time cast member.
Hey, Patrick. I like your style.
I am thrilled. I'm super excited. I can't wait to dive in, start filling out our spreadsheet of movies we want to cover. It's such a fun exercise, and yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. And Alice, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, I hope to watch another female-fueled Versus so that we can have you back on and talk about it.
You could also have me on anytime. It doesn't have to be about movies about women.
We'll definitely do that. The audience is already familiar with you. You've been on several movie versus movies.
That's right, Nick.
All right, everyone, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie. Movie versus movie.